Today I'm going to show you a quick tip, and that's how to easily bleed these older Honda ABS systems with the separate reservoir. Now the normal procedure is go into the vehicle, turn the key to on, come out, open the bleeder, let it drain out, close the bleeder, and repeat that process. And that's a tedious process, especially if you want to change out all the brake fluid in the reservoir here. So you can either get a helper or you're going to have to deal with constantly running back and forth, and this is going to take forever. But I have another method that involves turning the pump on and keeping it on so you can open the bleeder and just allow the fluid to come out continuously.
You don't want to run the ABS pump dry, so keep an eye on the fluid level in the reservoir. If the fluid level is dropped below half, stop and refill it.
Another thing you don't want to do is run the pump for too long with the bleeder closed, because that builds up pressure in the ABS modulator. There's a pressure switch inside that tells the pump to shut off when it hits a certain pressure. So after you close the bleeder, don't let the pump run for any more than 2 seconds. Now to make the pump run, the easiest way to do it is go to the ABS fuse box, which is right here, and just take the cover off. And over here, you'll see a series of wires. The wire you're interested in is a yellow wire with a red stripe, and that's this wire right here. So you want to trace it to its connector, which is right here.
This wire color will be found on 94 to 97 Accords and 94 to 97 Civics.
And then you want to back probe the connector. Like that. Make sure that this T-pin doesn't touch any metal surfaces. Now I've hooked my test light up to battery negative. I'm going to test it by touching it to battery positive. And it lights. So I have a good connection here. Now what I'm going to use this for is a glorified jumper wire. It's going to jump the control side of the relay to ground, which will activate the ABS pump. The reason I'm using this instead of a jumper wire is if you touch something you shouldn't, this could save you from blowing fuses and causing other damage. Now for this to work, the key has to be in the on position. When I touch the end of this test light to this T-pin, the ABS relay here should activate and the pump motor should run. As I said before, don't do it for any longer than 2 seconds unless the bleeder valve is open. So I'm just going to touch it. And it works. And you could do this with both hands. You have one hand here to activate the pump, and the other hand will be opening and closing the bleeder valve, and you could easily do this on your own. Over here I have my stuff set up. Down here is your bleeder. I have some clear vinyl tubing attached to it. Took an ordinary soda bottle, drilled a hole in top, stuck the tubing through the top. This is a bleeder wrench. This is a 10mm bleeder. When you drill the hole in the top of your bottle, you want the tubing to fit slightly snugly so it doesn't fall out. But be aware that pressure can build up in the bottle to the point where after you remove the tube, the brake fluid could spray out at you. So you want to keep the cap just a little bit loose so that pressure bleeds out. Otherwise you can make a giant mess. Another thing to be aware of is the bleeder wrench tends to slip down off the hex here if you're not careful, and you can end up rounding off the bleeder, so make sure that it stays fully engaged to the hex and it doesn't slide down too far or partially engage the hex. So what I'm going to do is prime for 2 seconds, and then while it's still running, I'm going to open the bleeder. Close the bleeder. Here's a better look. Let the pump prime for 2 seconds. Open the bleeder. Close the bleeder. Deactivate the pump. Now if you were just bleeding the modulator, you just look at the hose, and if there's no bubbles while the fluid's flowing, you're done. If you're changing out the fluid, you'll have to do this multiple times. To refill the reservoir, pull the rubber plug off, then remove the plastic cap. Just use your fingernail to pull it off. Then you're going to want to use a funnel and fill it very slowly, checking the reservoir often. It doesn't take much fluid.
After you're finished bleeding or changing the fluid, you want to fill the reservoir to the max line.
Now it may be difficult to see what the level is in the reservoir. Get a work light, just shine it through the top.
And then just wiggle the reservoir. If you look closely, you can see the fluid level moving back and forth.
And don't worry if you overfill it by a bit. Again, you could just run the pump and open the bleeder to drain out any excess if you put a little bit too much in there. Once you're at the right level, we install the plastic cap and the rubber plug. Then you can remove your hose. Your bleeder wrench. And don't forget to reinstall the rubber cap on top of the bleeder to keep out debris. The bleeder will leak a bit of brake fluid around the threads as you're doing this because the brake fluid is coming out under pressure. Then remove your T-pin, put the cover back on the fuse box. That's it.
If your ABS light comes on after performing this procedure, just disconnect the negative battery terminal for a few minutes to erase the false code. If your radio has a flashing anti-theft light on it, make sure to have the code for it before disconnecting the battery.